All right, here we are with another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. How are you today, Sal?
Doing wonderful, Ryan.
Well, as our guests can see,
my
Glenn is
gosh.
here. He has props. He's you're sort of like Gallagher used to be when he'd show up on stage and always had props. Yeah. So, well, we always appreciate
no watermelons.
No watermelons and no sledgehammers. So, all right, question of the day is how we're going to start you out, just like always.
That's right.
Glenn, name a current trend that you don't understand.
This ought to be good.
And can I get some context here? Because we could talk about pets, aging, politics, or even agronomy.
Well, I think you can pick, but we'd probably the entertainment value. The entertainment value would be better if you went like politics or something. But we're probably supposed to stay off of it. But
Yeah,
that's up to you. But maybe since you seem to be focused more on agronomy, shy away from agronomy for your question of the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's not what I was expecting. I was kind of expecting you to go towards agronomy.
No, I'd rather see you run wild for a few minutes.
Yeah, we're going to run wild. I think I started out with pets, The trend is that, we all love our pets. But my trend is that our dog finds her way higher into the bed every night. Even though she knows that eventually I'm going to figure out that my knees are in my chest and I'm going to kick her and launch her into the middle of the floor somewhere. Every night she works her way up a little bit.
That's
higher.
hilarious.
That's
really
funny.
is.
So you're struggling to understand that. Yeah,
Yes, I'm struggling to
she
understand.
thinks it probably should be obvious to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of dog?
It's a Labrador, so it's
she's
not like a lap dog.
She's
80
a 100
pounds?
100-pound
100 pound?
And she starts out on the floor, but sometime during the night she creeps up and she starts out at Donna's feet. But if you give her enough room, she'll go crossways to the bed and stretches out. I think she's trying to snuggle. I think, being a Labrador and, and being 60 degrees or 65 degrees, she's probably getting cold.
Yeah, she's ready.
The UPS driver had to bring ours back one time. He brought the packages up to the house while the lab got up in the truck, and he got down the end of the driveway, and he had to turn around and bring the dog back. He gets down there, and the lab's up there by him.
Yeah.
Where are we going? Huh?
Pretty social critters, aren't they?
So we have some stray cats in the house, and my wife texted me the other morning about one of them that just bugs her to death, and she was still asleep after I left, and she was like, "That cat is so fat, so loud, and has absolutely no respect for personal space." And I texted her back and I said, "You seem to have put a negative slant to her best redeeming qualities." She's like, "I think you're wrong." So.
I think we established before that you're a cat person.
I mean, I'm a softie for stray animals. That's my problem.
Yeah,
I've got a problem with stray animals.
We've got a shop kitty.
Yeah.
It was one that somebody dumped, and I saw it. I couldn't catch him.
You saw him dump it?
Oh yeah, I saw him dump it.
Really?
Wow.
And I couldn't catch him. I was in a 4-wheel drive tractor in kind of a little.
What you gonna do?
In one of those tree tunnels, and I've given them what for anyway.
And then you took the cat.
Well, I called Donna. I said, "You better come get this cat. It looks like it's fairly friendly." And,
They all are if you got food.
Yeah, that's true.
You got a bowl of milk? They're friendly.
Yeah, she is social. I tell you, when you get in the shop every morning, if you stop at our shop, she'll come out and greet you, and most times she's screaming at the top.
She mouser?
She'll catch one occasionally, but she cohabitates with the coons and the mice, and yeah.
Sure.
You can always tell when they've been living in the combine because there's always a big pile of mess underneath of it.
Yeah.
Between her and the coons.
There you go. That's what you
I
didn't
did
understand.
it. I tell you the other day though, I actually had a groundhog in my shop. I was talking to Jeff Davis on the phone, and I was like, I think I just saw something run underneath the shuttle. And I said, "Now you hear me screaming. Remember that if it was a coon, they'll hightail it.
Yeah.
And if it was another cat, right, it found its way in, they would, you go poking underneath there with a broom handle, they're going to run from you." But I said, "Now, if this is really a groundhog," I said, "it might challenge
It'll
you."
come right back out. Yeah.
And anyway, I poked a broom handle in there while I had Jeff on the line asking some agronomic question.
And you were in battle.
And here comes this, it was about a half-grown groundhog that had found his way into my shop in the middle of the day. So go figure.
I have 3, and they're just 2 or 3, and they're absolutely driving me crazy.
Groundhog?
Elusive little critters.
Oh, they are.
Yep.
But they're under the shop, or they're getting into your building.
Well, they're under.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're under. So I've struggled.
They won't leave on their own.
No,
Nope.
for sure.
And they're having a resurgence, which
Yeah, they are.
Which tickles me to death, because when I was a kid, that was probably one of our favorite entertainment, was going and trying to
Seeing ground.
What?
send groundhogs to their maker, right?
Oh, okay. I was going to say.
Trying to be slightly political.
Well, he was
right,
trying to
Terry?
stay out of that, but you let him right into it. So, yeah. So, all right, Sal, what's a trend you don't understand?
It's a bigger trend. I think the need for attention. I think that kids or people or whatever they got to do, it just seems like they have to do something to get attention, whether that's lifestyle choices or whether it's tattoos or hair or whatever. It's like it seems like everybody needs to be in the spotlight. If they can't do something, they try to get attention themselves. I don't know. I don't understand it.
Isn't that why we do this podcast?
Yes, the guy.
Look at me. Where's the camera? Where's the camera?
Yeah. There's 3 cameras, right?
Yeah, I don't
Make
understand.
sure they're all pointed right here.
It's everybody else, not me.
So, sorry, Sal.
Oh.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Don't you throw rocks at my glass house?
Exactly. Hey, and I think and I get drug into it too. But I don't understand how if you don't agree with somebody, you have to be wrong.
Oh,
there used to be so much understanding for, hey, you have a differing opinion than I have, and I'm okay with it. And boy, it's not that way anymore. I don't understand the divisiveness, and it's easy to get caught up in it. So, I can't understand that's where we are, and it seems like that won't fix itself.
you don't
either.
like what I like, you're a Nazi.
Right, exactly. So, for sure. Well, Glenn, clearly there's a trend that you've been bringing props in, and this is more. It's a growing trend.
Is that on the camera? Can we see all this?
Well, I was ordered to bring in props, right?
All right, well.
So my immediate supervisor said, make sure you bring in props, right? So I really had no choice.
Hey, tell us what you think about him whenever we get off camera.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to harvest. We're staging this pretty close to, we'll probably shoot this one out there just immediately after Labor Day. So there'll be combines running. Probably already are in spots. But
Yep.
what you got for us pre-harvest?
Yeah, well, I mean, I brought some.
Somebody's suffering yield at this point in time.
No, not really. I mean, so these 3 or 4 leaves that we've got right here. Sal, have you seen this before? Are you familiar with that?
Oh,
boy,
here we
it's
go.
always
Question of the day, Sal.
Yeah. I gave one to Ryan too. But you notice those little
I'm a has-been.
those kind of black speckles all over those leaves is kind of public enemy number 1 for northern Indiana, and has been it's been documented in southern Indiana for the last 2 or 3 years, and that's actually tar spot, right? So what you're looking at are the stromata. That's the fruiting body of tar spot.
Hold that up for the camera.
And those, obviously this doesn't look like an economic threshold, right? I mean, this obviously isn't a huge amount of surface area lost out of that leaf. But what you don't see is that it has a fairly long latent period. In other words, it takes about 3 weeks from the time infection takes place to actually seeing more fruiting bodies. Takes about 3 weeks. And during that time, it's actually growing vegetatively inside that leaf, destroying cells, right? Destroying tissue that would normally be contributing to yield, right?
So those visible dots.
Yeah.
How long ago was that plant infected?
Yeah, so I went by, this is the second time I've been to this field, and so I knew they were there this morning. That's why I was there. And it's probably been a week, and no more have shown up. So the next generation, when they express themselves, will probably totally predispose this plant.
Wow.
And this did get a fungicide, right? So this is one of the things I think I made mention of the last time I was here, was around how there's this change in the thinking of how we apply fungicide and fungicide timing for our part of the world. As early as we plant and as low as the incidence is for tar spot, I still believe that probably the best frequency is to do a grand growth vegetative stage application and then delay the R stage application, which R stage means we're into flowering, to about R3, right? R2, R2.5, R3. If we delay it to R2.5, R3, then the normal residual that we get out of that fungicide should get us far enough down the path by the time tar spot would set up housekeeping and then go through a second generation, because it's not normally the first generation that's going to predispose a plant. It's going to be that subsequent generation, right? Because each one of those stromata is going to produce, crazy amounts of spores and infect that plant. And then the next time you see lesions, probably the entire leaf is going to be predisposed.
So do you think it's is it predictive now that this is going to be an annual thing, or is it like a southern rust? I mean, explain how do we get the...
So it's not a transient disease like southern rust, right? Okay. Southern rust will always be here. It always has been here, right? But typically with southern rust, it blows in from the south, right? It doesn't overwinter at this latitude. This particular pathogen came from Central America, and it overwinters here just as well as it does there. Right, so it overwinters here. Fortunately, it doesn't normally set up housekeeping, and I don't know that we know why, but I suspect it's because until corn gets into reproduction, right, you hardly ever see. I mean, you can get infection during vegetative stages, but generally you don't see it really blow up until you get into reproduction. What changes when you get to reproduction is you get no more new leaves. Photosynthate levels in the plant go way higher. And so the plant really becomes, Sal, a much better host, right, when you get into reproduction than it was during vegetative stage. Because during vegetation, man, that plant, as fast as the factory's running, it is using that photosynthate to build more factory, right? Once you flower, once you start silking and have a tassel up there, the leaves are as big and as many as you're going to get. The root system does not appreciably change from that point on. What changes is photosynthate levels in the plant go up until it starts filling grain. And so anyway, that's my hypothesis for why we don't see it normally really blow up until we get well into reproduction, because that's really the case for a lot of pathogens, right? You'll probably notice there's a lot of leaves out here with GLS on them, and we've had a fair infection of GLS, and those growers that raise high-yielding corn on purpose. I'm saying this because I said this to Sal the other day. He thought this was so clever.
He said that we were talking. He goes, "Well, our growers that raise high-yielding corn on purpose, as opposed to the ones that accidentally do it,
accidentally nose into 250 bushel corn."
Yeah. But that's true, right?
Oh,
we have plenty of growers that they'll raise 250 to 300 bushel corn, but they don't do it with the consistency of those growers that manage intensely and use multiple fungicide applications. So those growers that raise high yield corn on purpose are typically using multiple fungicide applications, right? One of the other neat things I brought in was this was out of the same plot. And you guys have all seen this particular symptomology. What is this, Sal?
Potassium.
Ryan?
I forget.
Wow. You know what?
I forget.
I may have a job forever.
That's why we hire you.
So this is
So this is it. This is Glinton. Never again.
Nope.
Never.
Remember his
never
last
again.
episode?
Right. Exactly. Here we go. That was easy.
So if it was
I
potassium,
made notes.
yeah.
It'd be on the edges.
That's right.
That's
if it was
right.
potassium,
It's
it'd be on the
nitrogen.
edge. This is nitrogen
Nitrogen.
deficiency. And if this were at the bottom of the plant, then we wouldn't think much of it. But this was from the ear leaf. Right?
Well, how are we supposed to know that?
I know that. Well, you wouldn't know that.
We're
but you
podcast
should-
hosts.
That's right.
We're podcast hosts. That's why we have guests.
Can you guys hand me a shovel over there? I need to dig this hole just a little deeper. So anyway, I just thought this was interesting. This was from the ear leaf, and this is nitrogen deficiency. And yes, the corn is within a day or two of being what we can officially say is physiological maturity, right? But this says that we probably planned the nitrogen a little close, right? I mean, we all want to be good stewards of the environment. We want to be good stewards of nitrogen because it's an energy intensive nutrient to make and to supply and very expensive. But this might have been cutting it a little bit close. Now,
Is that side dress corn? Did it have a side dress pass?
I don't think this was because this is
all
20
pre-plant?
inches.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this was all pre-plant, and what I suspect is that this might have normally been enough in, but it probably wasn't enough in for this crop because this was in 20-inch rows, 34,000, and I mean there are years out there like this, right? I mean there's these these honkers that have filled absolute. That's not a technical term, by the way. That's
Honkers.
just.
I would have known that one.
That's just
Why
y'all.
did you
That's
ask
just,
me what a technical term for a big ear out of
yeah.
honker,
But I mean,
obviously.
this thing is not just at full dent, right? You can see the milk lines almost all the way down. If we pull a kernel off, and I always like to clip the pedicle, that little umbilical that comes off of them, that's called the pedicle. And if you pull that off, I typically like to bite it off. Yeah,
You're a technical agronomist, right?
Yeah.
That's how you do that.
Yeah.
that's what I
So,
thought.
so what you'll notice is that it's already starting to form a black layer. It's kind of a translucent. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yeah, I can.
But anyway, it's kind of a translucent. So the black layer is nearly formed on this corn. Even if tar spot were to take these plants and completely consume them next week, it shouldn't have any bearing on yield other than maybe harvest losses from standability.
So that's 20-inch rows.
Yes.
And 30+ thousand population.
Yes, sir.
That's gonna be a nice field.
Oh yeah, this was actually from a plot over by Bobby Busick, right? One of our account reps over by Mitchell, and I don't know what everybody else put down, but I'm pretty sure there were quite a few estimates that had the winning hybrid being over 300 bushel.
Wow.
And I think it's very likely. I put it at 310.
That's amazing.
So we'll see how many weak places there are. But at the end of the field where these were taken, there's no question it's well in excess of 300 bushel.
Well, if you hadn't shot yourself for ever being back on, we
I
would
know.
have followed up with
Well,
you.
I know,
but
but we'll never know.
since it's your last episode, I guess
Well-
we'll call Bobby.
This was a little tricky, this was hard to tell the difference between the midrib and the
Oh,
margin.
he's trying to make it up. Yeah.
That was total complete BS. So
I used to know some of this stuff.
that's true. Yeah, you used to be the lead agronomist years ago. So
I don't know now, but I'm sure some of that's changed.
it happens. So anyway, I've got other props here, right? There, I
Let's
would
talk
say,
about beans.
Yeah, let's talk about beans. So this is showing up in a lot of fields, right? This is a soybean plant that's died prematurely, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why, right? If you look at the vascular system down here, the pith has been disintegrated. That's indicative of brown stem rot, right? Which is really common. And we have kind of a weakness in the, I don't want to pile on, but in the Enlist product lineup, right? In the Enlist soybeans, right? They are a little bit weaker on brown stem rot maybe than what would be Extend, right? And I say that knowing that Extend has had its skeletons in the past too, right? And you think about when we bring new trait platforms, whether that's Roundup Ready, and immediately following releasing Roundup Ready soybeans back in the 90s, there was this epidemic of SDS, right?
That's right.
And it's because when they make those, when they use cell transformation to make those initial lines, right, you end up with a lot of soybeans being closely related, right? And if they have weakness to SDS, then a big part of the product lineup has a weakness to SDS, right? A few years later, there was another trait released, and sclerotinia kind of blew up for a few years. And then with the last iteration, we actually had, if you remember, stem canker became a problem with the Extend Flex line. Well, this is the thorn in Enlist is brown stem rot. But you can also see some SDS, right? The pith is that center portion when it's discolored. That is indicative of brown stem rot. When you see the cortex outside of that, when you see it discolored, that would be SDS. And then if you ever see these sunken places, like right here on the stem, see that kind of sunken? That actually is stem canker. Right? So we actually have all three diseases. That's why this thing is completely predisposed. But I don't want you to believe that all soybeans are in jeopardy, right? Here's a field that I came
This one's going to be okay.
Yeah, this one's absolutely outstanding. And
Doesn't take an agronomist.
yeah.
I don't know
And
what
so-
pot you grew that in, but no.
No. Actually, this came from the field, and this was, this was a field very, very close to where this corn was taken. And this is in 20-inch rows also. And you'll notice where all the pods are held, right? We talk about this in the wintertime when we talk about soybean physiology and how do you exploit that for higher yields. We always point out that most of the yield is held in the middle part of the plant. You can see that in this plant. But you can also always tell when you have really good soybeans, right? When you have really good soybeans and you look up here at these uppermost nodes and you see that this raceme, right? Actually, there's 2 racemes here at this node. And we have 4 on one and 2 on the other. So at one node at the top of the plant, we actually have 6 pods that are pretty far into development, right? They're mid R5 and approaching R6, right? So it won't be there won't be a lot more time before these guys are not in peril at all. Even if the plant were to die prematurely, it still wouldn't have much influence on yield.
And those are their bonus pods, right? When you get potted all the way to the top like that.
That's correct, right? A month ago, I was talking about at the field day, if you remember, I was talking about the old timers saying, these beans have taken a second growth, and that means that they've put a few more trifoliates at the top of the plant because you had a rain event or whatever. Well, here's just an example of where those upper nodes that they put on have really produced. Right?
There's a massive 4 pod bean right down there. 4 bean pod right there in the middle.
Oh, I can't see it, but that's probably because it's the wrong distance from me. We didn't talk about aging. But there's lots of things about aging that.
Well, clearly, I mean, I'm not the only one that doesn't know stuff about agronomy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, the
4 bean pods. So
I couldn't spit it out, but I knew what I was talking about.
you did.
You guys didn't.
You did. So, one of the other things that I've noticed a lot of here lately is, and in fact, there's a little bit of both, right? So this is one that I talk about frequently, right? This is Cercospora. And it looks like you guys both are old enough to remember using Benazon or Basagran. Remember when you spray Basagran, you always got this kind of a bronzing color on the upper leaves? That's exactly what this looks like. And of course, most growers are more familiar with Cercospora because Cercospora is the pathogen that actually affects bean color, right? It causes that purple seed stain. And you guys are also familiar with Cercospora because it's a Cercospora fungi that's also probably the largest yield robber in corn, and that is gray leaf spot. Gray leaf spot is Cercospora. Cercospora leaf spot is Cercospora, and so is frog-eyed leaf spot, right? Frog-eyed leaf spot is also Cercospora, and this is the time of year when it really sets up housekeeping and takes a lot of bushels because you realize that. Maybe not the earliest planting in these early maturing varieties. They're going to probably start being combined next week. The 2 9s.
Yeah.
But the 3 6s, 3 9s, even the 4 O's, those really shouldn't reach physiological maturity until we get towards the tail end of next month, right? If not the first part of October. And so any of these kind of pathogens, right? I found some Phylosticta, but it's obviously lost somewhere in my truck. That's another disease that we're starting to see show up. And you see real dark lesions that then become necrotic on the margins of the leaf. That would be Phylosticta. But all these diseases are pretty good about killing off soybeans prematurely. And a lot of times we have great hopes in August. We get the rainfall and we think, man, this is going to be an outstanding soybean year. And then it's these diseases that take the top off. That's one of the reasons why we're so adamant about the secret to high yield soybeans is about managing deeper into the season, right?
With fungicides and taking care of it.
And insecticides. I can tell you, I'm just almost sick this morning, right? There was 2 things that were preoccupying me on the way over here. One was around mystery, that mystery yield loss, right? Or I was thinking about that all the way over here. How in the world could we possibly validate that? And the other one was around a field that I looked at yesterday that's one of my own. And it was late planted, and I haven't looked at it very often, right? I went down there yesterday, and as I drove past the field, it's just skeletonized. And I bailed out in there, went looking, couldn't find anything. It's like, I figured out what it was. It actually was green clover worms, right?
Oh.
So green clover worms are out there, and when you get them or cabbage loopers, right? These are typically small green larvae. They're both the product, right? They're the larvae of a lepidopteran, which means a moth. And they have relatively short lifespans. I think it's probably academic. They both are controlled the same. There is a little bit of difference between the larvae. If it's a cabbage looper, it's got 3 legs up in the front, would be the thorax part of the of the caterpillar. And then in the back, it has 3 prolegs on the abdomen, which looks like legs that have suction cups. and they're right at the ends, right? And so they inch forward. You know, you've seen inchworms. On a green clover worm, what differentiates them is they have 3 prolegs on the abdomen, kind of in the middle of the abdomen, and it has a fourth set of prolegs right at the very tail end, right? But like I said, it's just totally academic. Both of them are bad. Both of them are easily controlled, right? That's, it's one thing to miss something like Japanese beetles or have a miss with, hemiptera, like the true bugs, the stink bugs, right?
Yeah.
Though, if you miss them, right, you probably did everything in your power. But these were easily controlled. So to not get those was just a function of I didn't want to go down there and look at the drowned out spots, right? Mm-hmm. But I went down there to it's been long enough since the last rain to tell how much is drowned out, and got down there, and it wasn't in all the fields, right? The stuff that was fuller season was almost completely unaffected, but there's probably 150 acres there that was this earlier variety, and I mean it was absolutely defoliated. It's probably 50% defoliation, but 50% defoliation on soybeans looks like there's nothing left, right? Sure. So I'll probably get down there and get those sprayed, even though it might just be revenge treatment.
Revenge spraying.
It might be revenge spraying, but I'm at least going to have a fungicide on them so that what photosynthetic material is there can hopefully fill what pods are there, right? Because the pods are still there. It's just the leaves that got chewed up. So.
And insecticides, I saw some feeding on that other healthy plant, and it just, if we're going to be in there making a fungicide treatment, put the insecticide in. They're cheap. And there's enough, what do you call them, nibblers and the feeders out there to
absolutely
clean them up.
Yeah, you know what? This is kind of a little known secret, but in reality, in this part of the world, when we make fungicide and insecticide applications, believe it or not, the insecticide probably has a higher return on investment by 2 or 3-fold what the fungicide does. Because 1, it's less expensive, and 2, it actually probably provides more bushels of protection, right? We've done that. When I was with Winfield, we did the work around fungicide efficacy on soybeans, right? And any one application probably is not much more than 2 or 3 bushel. And that is, if you make a fungicide application, you're making only a fungicide application. And if you make a fungicide insecticide application, you make it versus an insecticide application, right? So you're only testing for a fungicide. And that's, has a real high frequency. It's probably, 80+% of the time you see a positive response, but it's a really low amplitude. When we make field applications here, we often see 10 and 12 bushel responses. Well, how do you make up that difference? Well, it's actually the insecticide that makes up the difference, right? And so, and probably, having this outbreak of stink bugs, and
we hate them.
We do, although they haven't been nearly as bad this year, right? And so, I don't know how much time we have left.
Well, but you mentioned mystery yield. So before you get to the final point, what do you mean by mystery yield?
Yeah, so mystery yield loss is something that's been well documented for probably 40 years, right? Even when I was in college, it was known that there is this loss of yield when you let corn dry in the field. There's this loss of yield that is greater than just harvest loss, right? And so, just a few years ago, Bob Nielsen at Purdue University did some research and trying to quantify what happens to this yield, right? And so we're not talking about losing ears or losing kernels, which you do, right? When you let corn dry in the field, as you shell it, a lot of times the ears will hit the snap rolls or hit the stripper plates, and you'll start butt shelling. But it's more than that. And so he did the work and decided that what it was is, a seed is not metabolically active, but it is still alive, right? And so there must be some really small amount of respiration that's hard to quantify, especially as that corn is drying, that which is using dry matter, right? If that embryo is still respiring in any way, it would be using starch that was put away for later and should be potentially giving off CO2. Now, there was this last year at the Indiana CCA, there was a ag engineer from Iowa State that claims that Bob Nielsen's data had a flaw in it and that that's not what was going on. But personally, I still think Bob was correct. I think it probably is from respiration that takes place, right? Because a seed is still alive. It may be metabolically inactive, right? So it's not like, when this seed gets planted in the ground and it goes from 0 to 60, right? And its engine is running, its mitochondria are running at 7,000 RPM, right? Maybe a seed at rest is more like idling, or maybe it's like those old, single
cylinder.
They went put, put, they just barely hung on. But obviously, the scutellary node and the embryo are still alive, and there's some. So anyway, that's what I was thinking about on the way over here. Is there should be some way to quantify this. If nothing else, we ought to put it in an airtight container and measure CO2, right? And so if there's CO2 coming off that corn, then that's obviously started out as, starch or some kind of fuel source, right? Because that's the oxidized form of what a plant is doing. So anyway, one last thing I've got to tell you before I leave is I went past a field, but I was already running late from going, making kind of a long loop here. But I went past a field, and it happened to be the other guy's brand. But it's not proprietary to the other brands of seed. But I did notice that here was a green plant. Most of the plants in the field were green, but then you'd have these areas where you'd see two dead plants together, and then there'd be a gap, and then there'd be a dead plant, green plant, dead, 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 green, green, green. When you see that from the road, you need to stop and go out and pinch those stalks, right? Because what most likely is going on is that it's crown rot. And and the reason why those plants are prematurely senescing is because the bottom of the plant has been infected since early in the season, but the pathogen finally overtook it. It's basically grown into the vascular system and plugged the vascular system up to where the plant can no longer move photosynthate down to the roots. The roots die, the plant then dies, and what you end up with are these gray skeletons of plants. They still oftentimes have great yield, right? Yield potential. It doesn't always affect yield, but what it does really affect is standability. And so if you, as we get to physiological maturity and you start to see this appearance from the road, you need to go out and do a push test. And if you have more than 20%, right? So if you push 20 stalks, give them a good shake, and more than 4 of them fall over or break, then that's a field you need to put at the highest priority, and that's where you need to start shelling, right? That would be the tip of the day, right?
Very good.
Good.
So
I don't have anything else.
That was a good day, Glenn. Good job.
Nice
thank
job.
you. You're welcome.
Good props.
There you go. You said bring props.
Right. Yeah. I won't get very
right.
many more months of doing that. Then you will have to just go on your own. You just got to go on your good looks and knowledge after harvest.
It could happen.
All right. Well, thank you, Glenn. Well, that's another episode of The High Ground, powered by Premier Companies. Please like and subscribe.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.